Happy Monday. Happy Monday. If you're in Canada, it's a long weekend. It's our Thanksgiving weekend over here, which really, in my books, is just an excuse to eat a little bit more, celebrate that we can see people we want to see this year. Last year we couldn't. And 2 years ago this time, I was getting ready to have Quinn. So there's a lot to reflect on this time of year, definitely, for myself, and I'm sure for you guys too, because I mean, this time of year is really just always so interesting in terms of change, you know? And right now the leaves all around us are really, really shifting, and I find it's evoking so much of what is transforming and what is getting ready to just reveal itself ultimately, right? I love that parallel, like even that metaphor with nature where, you know, the beauty that happens right before everything sheds and disintegrates and it hibernates, and just gets itself really ready for the winter, sort of like nesting, hunkering down situation. It's a really vulnerable time, and it's a really interesting time for me. Also, as someone who is a Scorpio sun, I have definitely a strong affinity to this time of year, and I'm really, really interested just in our power to prepare ourselves authentically and naturally and innately for a season of reflecting. I guess, you know, getting still, getting quiet. I'm sure even in parts of the world where winter isn't as intense as it is here, and just here it really requires us to really be okay with less distractions, because there's not as much to do, if you will, during the winter season as there is in the summer. So there's a really interesting dynamic between the seasons and our behavior, I think, for sure, in the northern parts of the world. So this week's coffee chat is brought to you with a amazing Little Victories oat latte. I think they're slowly phasing out their Fox. So we have, you know, it's funny, I was actually looking at this cup. These are the kinds of things that I wonder about in life. And I was like, is this a bunny or a hare? I think it's a hare. It was a fox before. I noticed they changed their logo though. There's actually no animal in their new logo, in their updated logo. So I wonder if they're gonna be phasing that out. But this is my favorite to-go coffee in Ottawa. It's so delicious. So I hope your Monday morning coffee is starting things off just right and hitting at the right place. At the time of filming this, I am looking ahead at the weekend, and I'm really excited. Being 2 weeks out of Quinny's birthday, there's a lot of fun, exciting stuff happening. We weren't able to celebrate last year because it was pandemic vibes, and I think this will be the last year that I planned such a big thing for the next little while. Not that I'm even planning a big thing, to be honest, and I just feel like it's become one of those things that feels overwhelming all of a sudden, because there's so many moving parts in terms of family, and also in terms of just the energy, I think, of people being really stoked to celebrate after not being able to celebrate last year. So we're doing a party on a little thing with my family and two of my best friends on Saturday, the weekend of his birthday. His birthday is the 22nd of October. And so Saturday we're gonna have a thing, and then on Sunday we're gonna have it with Nick's family, because essentially it's a good, like, pandemic practice to have, just to separate those two. And it also really helps me if I separate the two moms and just have them, you know, my mom gets her own thing and then my mother-in-law gets her own thing, because navigating that has become a little bit of a thing, as they both don't get to see Quinn as much as I think they would like, and I want them to be able to have the space to celebrate with him and just have their moment, you know, as his grandmother in that moment. And then also just navigating family stuff this last week has been insane, in terms of boundaries and in terms of just like, it's brought up so much for me personally in terms of my growth, in terms of how I was raised, just, you know, the conversations and exchanges just around getting ready for this like 8-person thing on both days. And then going into Thanksgiving weekend, where we also celebrate my nephew's birthday, which falls on Thanksgiving every year. And so there's a lot of like family stuff, I would say right now. There's a lot of family stuff, and I'm sure at some level you guys can relate. And the thing with family stuff is that it always brings us back to where our intention is with our growth, with our lives, where we have wounds, where we have even trauma, and where we just feel a little bit amiss. And my guess is, because you're my people, you probably have a bit of a challenging relationship with your relatives. You know, more or less so, depending, of course. But I think in general, what I've noticed just talking to each and every one of you, and just, you know, the exchanges that we've had either a little more in depth through reading or casually, is that, you know, our relationships with our family that we were born into, with the caregivers that are supposed to be the people that protect us and support us and root for us, can sometimes be a little, if not tremendously, fractured. And you know, sometimes the people that we the families that we were born into, the immediate family can be really, really solid, and then there can be challenges with extended family. And I think just looking at the energy of last week through the new moon with Chiron opposing, oh my God, like that stellium. If you guys haven't checked out the recording of the energy call that I released, available for every tier, I highly recommend you go check that out if you felt really triggered or uncomfortable last week, because the first like 10 minutes or so really breaks down what that energy actually looked like in the scope of the chart and all of that. And I think it's really relevant, because there is undoubtedly for all of us the story of our worth. Wherever we struggle to embody that and to own that is definitely related in our childhood years, particularly 7 and under. As parents, some of us now, to young children as well, that the triggers that we experienced will come up in those relationships, you know, and it will show us where we felt a little bit burned, a little bit not enough, a little bit where there was great things as well. You know, it shows us all of those parts. And so just to explore motherhood, but also to explore the energy of last week through the lens of how our power sits with us, and our power being our feeling, and through Libra season as well, with so many planets in Libra, including Mercury retrograde, really invites us to look at where we overcompensate for that neglect ultimately around our sentiment of worth and our sentiment of holding our own and being enough in the world. And I'm also working through week 3 right now of the Artist's Way with a few of you through tier 2 and up. And the Artist's Way is really a beautiful tool and workbook that ultimately, as you're doing it, kind of takes over your life a little bit, because you just keep going back to the prompts, and these are like week to week exercises. And they're really, really inspiring and really evocative as well for working through your re-accessing and reconnecting and re-strengthening, even just strengthening in general, your inner creative. And all of us here are creatives. And I mean, all of us are creatives. All of us are creatives. And what I mean by all of us here are creatives is particularly that I think all of us here are really keen to explore creative passions, interests, and pursuits in a really prominent way in our lives. You know, we are folks who are really driven and motivated by our artistic interests, and the Artist's Way particularly sees us rediscover that. So highly recommend it, whether you feel inclined to join tier 2 to jump in on that, or just pick up the workbook and see if it resonates with you. If you have any questions at all, you're more than welcome to ask them. But I want to mention that we're in the last week of Mercury retrograde. It's almost over. Officially it will be over November 2nd, but it stations direct October 18th. So, and then we go into that like post shadow period. So we're almost on the other side, but this week is going to kind of evoke a few things, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But one thing I want to talk about working through the energy of last week, where we have, stuff around our wounds and stuff around our pain and stuff around where we're trying to grapple and access and own our sentiment of worth. And this is something that I have been working consciously towards since 2017. And I talked about it last week, and a lot of Libra season brings this up for me, and Aries season too, as the opposing energy to Libra season, because it's the relationship that we have in our relationships. And I am a recovering people pleaser, as I have mentioned before. And this means that so much of where I show up in life is how can I make someone else feel seen? Because if they are seen, then I feel good about myself. But the truth of that needs to be more around how can I support myself to feel seen, especially through the energy of last week, where it brought up a lot of stuff about how I was never seen as a child, and I continue to not be seen. Actually, fundamentally, regardless of a pretty decent, I would say, relationship, my family would even say a very good relationship from their point of view, with me and me with them, I think I commit a lot of work, and I'm very open to holding space for them. There were definitely a lot of opportunities where I could have been like, I'm over this, and I'm just, I need a break, and I'm just, gonna cut off all communication. It is a very challenging and complex dynamic, and I definitely, through raising Quinn, can say that I feel I was it's very tangible and real for me how I was neglected, how I wasn't taught boundaries, how I wasn't taught I was never celebrated in who I am as a person. I had to find all of that on my own. And so if that resonates with you in any way, you're in really good company, because I know what that feels like. And I've had to realize over the last few years even that the people that which is what I was just speaking to a little bit ago, the people that as I was born and was taught are supposed to be my safety, my rally, my biggest promoters and supporters, actually don't even know how to do that for themselves. So for them to do that for their next of kin is really, really, really challenging, and if not even foreign. And I've had to do a lot of forgiveness and acceptance, self-acceptance, acceptance of them. And in a lot of ways, that's how I've been able to make peace with the situation. And, it's loaded. I would definitely say it's loaded. And so last week, whenever we have Chiron involved, we're going to see our deepest pain, whether that's trauma or just deep wounds revealed somewhere within us. We don't feel, in our charts, we can see where we have our insecurities and our vulnerabilities. All of us have that, some to a certain extent than others, and some also will have it to more of an extent than others, and some also will have it only really compartmentalized in like one area of their life, and then as women, generationally, ancestrally, this is something that I think as women we are all working towards, self-acceptance. And so last week, in sort of like this no coincidence situation, I was watching TV, and I never ever watch TV. Nick's been doing overnight shifts for the last week and a half, and he's got another full week of it now. And so normally he works daytime shifts like normal, shift work alone changes the dynamic in a relationship in a household. And then overnight shifts is a whole other ball game, because we're on opposite schedules, and Quinn hasn't actually been able to spend nearly as much time normally. And it's actually been kind of sad, but I know that, there's a lot of households that navigate that in general, like as a lifestyle. But Quinny's actually been like, where's daddy? What's daddy doing? It's very sweet and heartbreaking at the same time. And so he's working his overnight shifts, and so everything has shifted where Nick usually watches TV. I don't actually watch TV. I don't love TV. Can't really say I'm a TV person. I was at different phases in my life for sure, where I would binge watch shows. I would rather be studying or reading, or like a few of you and I were discussing, browsing Pinterest. I just love the Pinterest boards right now. And so in a rare moment where I turn on the TV for Quinn, that's another great thing, is that through that I recognize that out of Nick and I both, I will be less likely to turn on the TV for Quinn, even though I still wish I could sit Quinn in front of the TV. There's a part of me that definitely wishes that. He just doesn't have the attention span right now to do it. But I did turn it on to watch a show called Daniel Tiger, which is produced by CBC, and it's through the CBC Gem app. It's a great show. heard about it through friends. It's from the producers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And so it's fantastic. So I turned on Daniel Tiger, and I was prompted with, I saw, you know, in my, whatever it's called on Netflix, like stream kind of thing, that I might be interested in watching this Bob Ross documentary. Now, one of my favorite genres, I'm realizing when I do watch TV, is actually documentaries. Because what I love about them is I love watching the documentary and imagining what this person's birth chart is. And then I will Google their birth chart and try and see if, I think the website's called Astrobank. I think it's Astrobank or Astrodata, one of those two, has the best, most solid repertoire of charts. And what they do is they will give it what's called a Rodin rating, and a AA rating is like the most accurate birth information. And then like, I think it goes down to D, maybe past D, but anyways, the least recognized, like in terms of accuracy that I've seen is a double D. And so that's just a database that I go to. And so I checked Bob Ross's chart in there. And he's a Scorpio sun. And I went into all this stuff because I was listening to this whole documentary, and I was like, oh my God, love of animals, love of art, Neptune, you know, sixth house stuff. Like, what are we dealing with Pisces, you know? Then it was like, the title is like betrayal and, is it betrayal and, oh God, I can't, anyways, it's happy accidents, betrayal, and I want to say guilt. I'm not sure if it's guilt. But anyways, which is a very Scorpio title as well, you know? So anyways, watching this Bob Ross documentary, which for those of you who don't know, I did not know about Bob Ross. I have to say that I've noticed that he's popped up in sort of like vintage shops, and in even like one of this really fantastic like little boutique in Ottawa has some curated pieces of Bob Ross in their window. And I had thought, menswear shop, and I had thought to pick something up like that for Nick, almost kind of as an inside joke, because Nick introduced me to Bob Ross. He told me, I was like, who? Bob Ross. I forget how we even got into the conversation. It must have been one time he was watching a replay of Bob Ross painting, and I was like, who is this guy? Like, what are you watching? And he was like, oh, I used to watch him when I would come back from work and I would just need to like zone out. And he's like, I would watch this guy paint and I would just fall asleep. Now, this wasn't actually, after watching the documentary, the goal of Bob Ross television, but it seems like it was somebody, Bob Ross is a painter, and he was somebody who was very successful in the 80s as a painter teacher. And so ultimately, inspired by a few others of the genre, in the 80s, he decided to have a TV show which now so many people could just do with YouTube, right? Watching that too made me think of how accessible getting ourselves out there has been now. You know, we haven't had to jump so many hoops, which is amazing. But yeah, he had a TV show ultimately, and the TV show was called The Joy of Painting. The Joy of Painting. He is an extremely talented painter, is, and beautiful stuff. And it was all landscape painting done with acrylic paints. Really, really incredible. And so the thing that really spoke to me the most out of this Bob Ross documentary, more than like the drama and all of that, was it was betrayal and greed. It's happy accidents, betrayal and greed. Betrayal and greed is such an 8th house Scorpio energy, which when I saw that he was a Scorpio sun, I think in the 7th house too, I was like, oh my God, yes. But all the way that he is portrayed as speaking of himself in the documentary, or even the way his son, who's a main figure in the documentary, speaks, and I think a producer even of the documentary speaks of himself, speaks of his late father, is really Neptunian and Pisces energy. The ultimate artist, you know, and the ultimate just creator, but he has a lot of Sagittarius energy in his chart as well. Bob Ross, I can't remember where exactly, but he really struck me as someone who was an inspiring person for their point of view on life. Really wanted us to feel our best when we are doing what we love, exploring what we love, and creating what we love in life. And guys, I felt so compelled to like talk about this today, because I thought there's a link here between the way Bob Ross paints, the way he taught painting, the way he made it so inclusive, not a word that he used in any of his marketing and any of the stuff that I've seen lately either, but about his work and legacy and Bob Ross Inc., which is where all the drama lives. But the way that he just was portrayed as wanting to educate budding artists and the way that he wanted people to feel, this to me really struck me as early artist's way, the early artist's way. You know, it's like, how can you discover your truth and your authenticity and your power and your strength through your creative pursuits? And so some of the quotes that he had, one of the ones like is I think it's what the show is called, like title Happy Accidents. So he says, there's no mistakes and there's only happy accidents. And so what this was referring to is, and I picked this up like right away watching the documentary, I was like, oh my God, he's constantly, you know, he'll be painting like, I don't know, like a cloud or something, and then it doesn't go out the way that he wants, and he's like, oh, let's turn it into a bird. All of a sudden it's a bird. He's like, everything was just had this like super positive spin. He also has a lot of Leo energy in his chart. And from what I remember and what I saw quickly, you know, it's that playful side, that side of like, let's just make the best of it. And the Sagittarius energy as well is always like, glass is always more than half full. You know, the glass is overflowing. Like, how can you see things really from the perspective of love and light? And also Sag energy is very guru energy. And when you know, watch the documentary and you follow the legacy and the power, the influence, the way that people really like were drawn to Bob Ross, you really see that guru energy, you know? And I think so much of what his one-liners were like when he was painting could have even been turned into like Bob Ross mantras. Let me know if that even exists, because I would probably buy the book. I'm really sold, influenced, inspired by the way that he paints, the work, and the way that he evokes us to feel our best. That inclusivity is so interesting. And so some of his stuff, like quotes that he said, I wrote down 2 of them here because I thought they were really, really interesting. Was, talent is a pursued interest. Anything you're willing to practice, you can do. And then he said, famously said, there's an artist hidden in all of us. And so I really wanted you guys to think about this week as you're moving through your week, is what does your inner artist evoke in you? What does your inner artist say to you? How can you celebrate yourself through the perspective of your inner artist? Like Bob Ross would definitely speak, and I'm pretty sure he spoke to it in quotes or in the documentary as well, like just that Scorpio energy, our sense of power through the art that we create. You know, that inclusivity nugget, that like if you made a mistake in what you were creating, it's not really a mistake, it's just an opportunity to do something different. Everything, I think, through Bob Ross, though I didn't see him use this word at all, would probably be described as well as intuitive. It's like there's no such thing as mistakes. It's like, how can we switch things to what he called a happy accident? Like, how can we switch things intuitively and follow where we think this mistake is actually going to take us? You know, what could be the happy outcome of this? And so where we are being hard on ourselves, especially in our relationships, there's a lot of Venus energy moving through our solar system right now, and astrologically as such. I really want to invite you, loves, to look at your relationship with your worth through your creative strengths, through your creative powers. Where do you doubt yourself, and how can you celebrate yourself a little bit more? There's this fantastic exercise in week 2 of The Artist's Way, where they ask, Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way, asks us to look at but the bulk, okay, of negative sentiments that have been said about us in our childhood, and how we can turn those negative sentiments around and make them a positive sentiment. And all of a sudden that positive sentiment becomes an affirmation. And then she asks us to repeat those affirmations daily. And so if that helps you this week, what is something negative that you were told about your creative worth when you were a child, or when you were, you know, let's say 10 and under, that really impacted you? Or maybe what is something that you were told that was negative under the age of 10 and below, that impacted your sentiment of worthiness in the world, your sentiment of belonging? Because that's really it. Ultimately, when we are looking to connect with our worth, we're looking to feel safe. We're looking to feel okay. We're looking to be seen in the world. We're looking to feel like we belong to a social setting, to a social ecosystem that feels healthy and safe and supportive. And so when we're looking at, sorry for this like lovely background noise, you know, I just love to have the window open, and it just always, someone this week, everything I have filmed this week has just been like really anchored with some sort of crazy outdoor like fall landscaping noise. It's just been really annoying. We're just gonna try and roll with it. But ultimately, loves, I want you guys to really look at your relationship with your worth and the factors around that through the energy that's been moving this last week or so, Mercury retrograde as well. How can you get still, and how can you really, really tune into some of also what this Bob Ross documentary has brought up, you know, is really around like, I love this sentiment of like, anything you're willing to practice, you can do. So where someone told you, and repeating affirmations is a practice, where someone has told you that you are not worthy enough, that you are not good enough, that you know, cannot be something, you cannot do something, it's impossible, that's unrealistic. How has that debilitated your sense of confidence, which is also your worth, around said thing / around your power to be that thing, to embody that thing, to do that thing in life? And it could even be that not only did someone say that, but you're constantly attracting people who are reaffirming that in your current life right now. You know, I come from a family that either rejected artists or finds artistry and creative pursuits a little bit too messy, a little bit too bohemian to be realistic in any way. And that was something that, you know, if I ever did any creative pursuits, for instance, I had to do them like outside of the house, and they weren't really allowed to be brought back into the house. If they were, they were like compartmentalized. There was like a place for them where, you know, they could be seen at selective moments, I would say. And that really impacted my joy around being a creative person, you know? My mom was somebody who's very organized, very tidy, almost to the point of OCD. And so anything that kind of was like art, you know, artists are kind of like messy. We need that creative space to color our life in whatever moves us, and to be in the environment of someone who really was always trying to, for their own reasons, stunt that, made me believe that and develop a relationship with my own inner worth around my creativity and my own inner artist, that just there was no reason, there was no merit to even exploring that side of myself. It's really only through the Artist's Way that I've fully kind of, in the last few years, and just kind of exploring my this really untapped part of me until 2017, that I really developed this, you know? I have to say though, we can look back to our childhood, and the Artist's Way does a really good job at that. We can look back to our childhood and really discover what brought us joy and what made us happy. And then there was a part in our life, probably after the age of 10, at some distinctive point, where we kind of shut the door on that, and we created and reinforced beliefs that we had that didn't necessarily encourage our creative streak and our power at the end of the day. And you know, for me, it feels like all of us here are creatives, are artists, and in so being, our power lies in the practice and the capacity to hold space for those passions and those interests regularly in our lives. Shunning that from our life and allowing and inviting others into our life to make us feel small around those desires ultimately is not doing our sense of creative worth, but also our sentiment of confidence any good. Because after having done the Artist's Way, what I'm recognizing is that my capacity, and I feel that definitely will land for you, is when I hold space, when I carve out space, when I even have like a little studio in my home that is my own creative oasis, an entity, to have that, to establish a routine, and to establish a relationship with that space and those activities, brings me back to my center, and in so doing also gives me an outlet and a space to develop my inner confidence. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's why it's so important for children to, and I think the Bob Ross documentary might have even spoken to this at the end, why it's so important for children to develop a good, positive relationship with their creative work, because that is such a symbolism and such a developing relationship around their confidence and their worth. And so what we're doing here today and this week, what I'm asking us to look at is where that worth and that relationship was fractured. And I have an exercise that I'm not going to speak to today, but something in mind that we're going to look at later. I'm going to create a video around it because it'll be super, super relevant for us. But I just maybe watch the Bob Ross documentary if you feel so called to, but I just felt really, really, really compelled to show up and talk to you today and start your week off, the last week of Mercury retrograde, to inspire you to look at where you're being hard on yourself and how you can celebrate yourself a little bit more around your creative interests, around your creative pursuits, because I know somewhere in you, those are really, really telling and really meaningful. The relationship you have with your creative worth and the relationship you have with the folks who have encouraged you to feel really solid in your creative worth, and those who have discouraged you from being solid in that worth, or have denied you an outlet, or who have denied you any kind of positive feedback around that has had an impact on your sense of confidence and power ultimately in the world. And that goes back to, because I am saying and believing that those of us who are here, we really hold near and dear creative practices in our lives. And that creativity is so integral to our confident well-being and to our sacral chakra, our solar plexus chakra. Those are our lower chakras just after our root chakra, that really support us to feel safe and seen in the world. So what is the ritual, the practice that you have, and what is your relationship with that ritual and practice based on what you were told growing up and what you're being told now around that hobby or that interest, To that point, guys, this week's energy is really, really interesting because we've got a bunch of planets stationing direct. So next week we have Mercury stationing direct. And on Wednesday last week, we had Pluto stationed direct. And on yesterday, Sunday, we had Saturn stationing direct. So those two, Saturn and Pluto, have been retrograde for the last little while, and they're going to station direct, which is going to have definitely an interesting pull on the behavior of the planets that make an association with these planets that have been retrograde and now we're going direct. Technically, it's that all the retrograde sort of phenomenon and behavior and thoughts and stuff that's come up is now going to have the space to move forward, to kind of get out into the world, to start to demonstrate itself. One of the aspects, or that two of the aspects that I want to speak to particularly right now, is Venus and the Sun this week. Yeah, Venus and the Sun are really busy this week. The Sun is our identity, and Venus is our relationship with our creativity, our relationship with our worth when it comes to our creativity, our relationship with our inner artist. It's our relationship with our relationships. It's how we navigate our relationships, where we feel compelled to be people pleasers and to make people feel seen and at ease, or less so. It's our relationship also with how we don't necessarily feel that way. And on Wednesday this week, it is going to be sextiling that Saturn direct. And so this is really interesting because Saturn, when it has a beautiful relationship with a planet like Venus, and the sextile, if I'm not mistaken, is Venus's signature aspect. So planets do have signature aspects, which is really cool because it means they're like super comfortable in that zone, in that element. And so Venus on Wednesday will be sextiling Saturn. And I have to say that Venus has moved out of Scorpio. It is now in Sagittarius, early Sag here. But it's been in Scorpio for the last little while, and it didn't love being in Scorpio. So now it's out of Scorpio, it's in Sagittarius, it's sextiling Saturn that just stationed direct on Sunday and is stationed in Aquarius. And this sextile is really interesting because Saturn and Venus, when they come together like this, where Venus is our beliefs and our values, our beliefs and our values, or beliefs around our values, and our relationships and our healthy relationships and wanting to feel seen, Saturn is going to come and like structure and fortify that. So this, in the sextile context, is actually a really beautiful, harmonious, favorable, supportive aspect to go out into the world and really consider your relationship with your creative worth and your relationship with your relationships around your creative worth. Okay, loves? This is a really, really interesting time to connect with your inner artist and really give that inner artist and that creative worth space to thrive, space to grow. Saturn in Aquarius is space, but Saturn is also limitations. And that's what I mean about the fortification. This is a really interesting thing because Saturn will give structure and this kind of favorable momentum to Venus is creative needs and creative desires and how that brings you joy as well in your relationships. That noise is so annoying. Is this person using a chainsaw? Like, oh my God. So I really feel like on Wednesday and moving through this week, I'm curious to see our relationship this week and let me know in the conversation here as well as on Discord with our creative worth. Because I think if I had to sort of sum up planets in terms of creative worth, the sun would be involved for sure. But this Venus sextile Saturn energy is really, really interesting in the context of that. It's really gonna come help us, fortify, anchor, make concrete, make real, make tangible our relationship with our worth and even our relationship with the people who celebrate our creative worth, And also the people who maybe don't, the naysayers, they're kind of gonna struggle in our lives in terms of this week's energy with that aspect. And then the other aspect that I want to mention that's really interesting is on Sunday, we're gonna have the sun in Libra, almost outside of Libra. It's 24 degrees of Libra on Sunday, squaring Pluto. And this is a really, really, this square it causes us to want to take action and do something. And the sun being our identity, and it's our identity in our relationships, and Pluto being pretty destructive, and Pluto wanting to reveal what needs to go, and being in Capricorn, which is very goal oriented. It wants us to, have an accolade in mind and really go that way, achievement in mind and go that way. And so Sunday's energy feels a little bit like we're going to be culminating the week, flowing into the week around where we are very clear, especially with the Venus sextile Saturn happening on Wednesday, where we are fortifying that perspective, and Venus on Saturday, the day before Sun square Pluto, is going to be making an aspect to Chiron. Chiron is our wounds and our pain. So again, some of that discomfort is going to be coming up and we're going to have to look at it. And the purpose of this is really to destabilize and to recognize where we need to put by the wayside the relationships that need to go, the ones that see us sacrifice our truth, our identity. And that is really the square between the sun and Pluto. What's more is we're going to be having on Saturday as well, so I'm going backwards a little bit here between Saturday and Sunday, Mercury retrograde, one of the last aspects Mercury makes before it stations direct and moves out of retrograde on Monday. We're going to be seeing it sextiling Venus. So you see there's a lot of Venus energy. So Mercury sextile Venus, we're really wanting to communicate and process and integrate our beliefs around our values. What we want to adhere to, what we want to stand up to, what we want to make meaningful in our lives, what we really, really want to focus on, what we really want to be intentional about, and what we really want to carve out space for. This is so critical, so critical. And on Sunday, what's happening between the sun Libra squaring Pluto Capricorn is we're kind of what makes me feel uncomfortable, where I don't feel seen, it needs to go. I'm hypersensitive and hyper aware to where I need to take action and move forward. And Mercury's gonna station out of retrograde on Monday in Libra, and we're gonna start to feel the pull and the momentum to run with it. So pay attention to this energy this week. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna shut the door, finally, say, sorry. I feel like that was really annoying. I'm so sorry if this whole video for you guys was I can't even listen. There's closed captions, by the way. It's still kind of noisy, even with the window closed. So my loves, this week, I'm just really, really inspired to motivate you to look at what is meaningful to you. What is meaningful to you around your creativity and those practices that bring you joy. And in so doing, inspire you to move towards your confidence and your worth, and set boundaries around the things and the people that don't. This week, the energy feels really, really strong to support us in that behavior, in that intention, in those actions. We are starting to consider the relationships that we have with ourselves, the relationship that we have with our creative outlets, our creative needs, and our creative being in the world, and the folks and the people and the things and the tasks that, like the commitments that we have that don't necessarily see us feel good around our own beliefs, as well as our needs and our creative needs. And let me know how creativity resonates for you through this coffee chat, which again is so much longer than I would have liked it to be. I really, really wanted them to be shorter, but thank you for listening to the end. And let me know how creativity resonates for you, how it resonates for you through your sentiment of inner worth, through your sentiment of confidence. If you want to know more about my journey with my creative worth, I would be so happy to share. I have so many stories. Like, I used to paint when I was a kid, watercolor painting. I have so many anecdotes around this and just what I'm tapping into and discovering around my worth and my purpose as well when it comes to giving space to creativity in my life, and how I was never properly nourished or nurtured to do that for a variety of reasons. And what boundaries means for that as well. Because there is a little bit of a gap too when you start to establish your own relationship with your creative worth and then go out and people see you doing that and they see you acting on that. And that's a little bit of a trigger as well for those of us who are maybe uncomfortable with their own creative worth, or uncomfortable with you pursuing your creative passions, what brings you joy. And I know for just intuitively, I know that creativity or creative practice, whatever that is, and please let me know what your creative practice is that brings you joy. I mean, let's share that with one another. I would absolutely love to know what brings you joy at a creative level, because I think that would be so inspiring for each of us to share with one another and inspire each other. So I'll leave it at that. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any feedback. As always, you can send me a personal message here in Patreon. You can comment below of this Patreon video. And you can also join us in Discord, where there's an amazing conversation happening all day long, every day, in a variety of really, really interesting threads. If you haven't checked us out yet on Discord, if you're having trouble signing up or joining, please don't hesitate to send me a DM or message me. And don't hesitate to join, because it's a whole other part of Patreon that is really, really fulfilling, and I would hate for you to be missing out on that. So I'm wishing you the most beautiful week, tuning into your inner artist, tuning into your creative worth around what you want to create and bring to life in the world, around what that artist needs and who that artist is. And if there's any way that I can support this, if you have any questions about your Venus placements, your Neptune placements, these are all your artist placements in your charts, your Pisces energy, your Libra energy, your Taurian energy in your chart, and you want to look that over together, absolutely, let's book a session. DM me if you have any questions and we can look at that together. Okay, loves? My role and my goal is really to help you own what is meaningful to you and feel really seen in the world. And I'm so privileged and honored that you're here and that you're tuning into this and that you're a part of the 11th House Cafe. I'm wishing you the most beautiful week with all of these Venus transits, just discovering where you're going to have boundaries around what is meaningful to you, boundaries around your creative worth, and boundaries around the relationships that don't make you feel seen in your creative self. Here's to you. Happy coffee, happy Monday, happy long weekend if that's a thing where you are. And I will see you throughout the week. Talk soon, loves. Bye.